There are three things that can wound a narcissist more deeply than almost anything else. And what makes these triggers so powerful is that they attack the very foundation of how a narcissist sees themselves. Curious. Welcome back to another video on narcissist recovery. Today we are looking at a question that comes up again and again. Can a narcissist actually cry? Can they experience genuine emotional pain, or is everything simply an act? Pause. The answer is yes. Narcissists can feel intense emotions and can experience real psychological pain. The contradiction is that they may constantly portray themselves as the victim, insist that everyone has treated them unfairly, and still be extremely sensitive to anything that threatens their self-image. That sensitivity is actually part of what makes their victim performance so convincing. Beneath the confidence, arrogance, and superiority is often an extremely fragile sense of self. Something that another person might easily brush off can feel like a major personal attack to a narcissist, but not every setback affects them equally. Some things may only irritate them for a short time, while other experiences can strike directly at their identity and leave a much deeper wound. And when the person challenging them is someone they respect, admire, or desperately want approval from, the impact can become even stronger. Nothing tends to hurt a narcissistic ego more than losing control, being challenged, or having their sense of superiority questioned. It does not matter whether this happens privately or in front of an audience. Either way, they can experience it as humiliation. The strange part is that much of their suffering is created by their own behavior. They constantly create false versions of themselves, manipulate situations, hide their insecurities, and construct an image that is impossible to maintain forever. Yet they often believe they should be protected from the consequences of their own actions. So when someone refuses to play along, the narcissist may immediately feel attacked. Instead of reflecting on what happened, they may start thinking about revenge. In their distorted perspective, they believe other people should carry the blame and absorb the consequences of their pain, while they themselves should never have to face accountability. This is why narcissistic behavior has become such an important subject in conversations about unhealthy relationships and emotional manipulation. People around narcissists often find themselves giving endless patience, forgiveness, understanding, and second chances. And that is where the contradiction becomes obvious. A narcissist may behave hypocritically, demand understanding while refusing to give it, hurt someone, and then complain about being hurt themselves. Yet they can become heavily dependent on the kindness and attention of the very people they repeatedly mistreat. That dependence is also one of the reasons certain experiences can affect them so profoundly. So let us look at three things that can seriously shake a narcissist emotionally. The first is being rejected, ignored, or deliberately excluded. A narcissist usually has an extremely difficult time accepting anything that forces them to confront their weaknesses. Even a relatively small criticism can feel much bigger than it actually is because their sense of self is so easily threatened. One of their deepest fears is being abandoned or left without an audience. They often depend heavily on attention, admiration, validation, and recognition from other people to maintain their confidence. Without that external reinforcement, the image they have created can begin to feel unstable. And once someone becomes involved in their chaotic emotional world, getting away from that dynamic can be surprisingly difficult. The narcissist may pull the person closer, push them away, create conflict, offer affection, withdraw it, and then return when they sense their source of attention slipping away. Social media has made this even easier. Today, a narcissist does not necessarily need constant physical interaction to maintain the appearance of being admired. They can construct an online persona and receive a continuous supply of likes, comments, messages, compliments, and attention. Digital platforms can become another stage where they carefully manage how others perceive them. They can maintain shallow connections that might never survive genuine emotional intimacy, while still receiving enough external validation to keep their fantasy alive. But take away that attention, and the emotional impact can be far greater than you might expect. The second major wound is public exposure. Few things matter more to a narcissist than protecting their image. They can spend enormous amounts of energy controlling what people believe about them. They may exaggerate their achievements, hide their failures, rewrite past events, and tell elaborate stories to make themselves appear more successful, powerful, desirable, or important than they actually feel inside. Their public identity becomes almost like a carefully rehearsed performance. That is why exposure can be so threatening. When the difference between the person they pretend to be and the person they actually are begins becoming visible, their entire construction can start falling apart. And if other people witness that collapse, the narcissist may experience it as an unbearable humiliation. They are not simply worried that someone discovered the truth. They are terrified that the audience they worked so hard to impress will now see through the performance. The third thing that can deeply wound a narcissist is being directly confronted or insulted. This is especially revealing because narcissists may understand exactly how powerful words can be when they use them against someone else. They can deliberately choose statements designed to embarrass, weaken, confuse, or emotionally destabilize another person. Yet when that same level of honesty is directed toward them, they may suddenly become unable to tolerate it. Even constructive criticism can feel like disrespect. A simple observation about their behavior may be interpreted as an attack on their entire character. To them, honesty can feel like betrayal when it threatens the image they desperately want to maintain. And that is the real weakness behind the apparent strength. Their confidence depends heavily on protecting a carefully constructed version of themselves. When someone refuses to validate that version, refuses to chase them, exposes the contradiction, or simply walks away, the narcissist may be forced to confront something they have spent years avoiding. The person they thought they could control is no longer playing by their rules. And sometimes, that realization hurts more than any insult ever could. This pattern happens again and again. The moment you question even a small part of the identity a narcissist has carefully built, they may experience that criticism as a devastating attack. Their extreme sensitivity to insults often comes from what exists underneath the confident exterior: fear, anxiety, insecurity, and constant self-doubt. Behind the performance, there are usually parts of themselves they desperately do not want other people to see. And when those hidden weaknesses begin becoming visible, the entire image they created can start falling apart. The hardest thing for them to accept is being confronted with who they really are rather than who they have convinced everyone else they are. They may also have very little insight into their own behavior. Instead of examining how their actions contribute to their problems, they can place responsibility everywhere else. But once you understand these patterns, their emotional vulnerabilities become much easier to recognize. Beneath the manipulation, secrecy, and controlling behavior is often someone deeply afraid of losing power, admiration, and validation. If this is starting to make sense, take a moment to like the video. Now let's get into one of the most effective ways to deal with a narcissist. One of the things that can provoke the strongest reaction is seeing you genuinely move forward without them. Nothing can create more jealousy than watching someone they once controlled rebuild their life, find peace, become confident, and experience happiness that no longer depends on their presence. That can be incredibly frustrating for a narcissist because your happiness proves something they desperately do not want to accept. They were not necessary for your life. Many narcissistic individuals struggle to create a stable sense of fulfillment within themselves. Even when they achieve money, status, professional success, or other external goals, the satisfaction often does not last. They may constantly need another achievement, another compliment, another person, or another source of attention because external accomplishments cannot permanently fill an internal emotional void. This is also why some narcissists seem strangely comfortable when other people are suffering. Seeing someone else unhappy can temporarily make their own internal dissatisfaction feel less significant. If everyone around them is struggling, they do not have to confront the emptiness they carry inside. There is an old expression that says, "Misery loves company," and that idea can describe this dynamic perfectly. But there is something much more important for you to remember. Your mental, emotional, and personal well-being matters far more than anything a narcissist thinks about you. A narcissist may become surprisingly good at recognizing your emotional weak points. They can notice when you are angry, resentful, hurt, confused, or secretly hoping they will change. Those unresolved emotions can become openings they use to pull you back into the same cycle. That is why creating distance matters. And sometimes, distance needs to include not only the narcissist, but also the people around them who constantly defend, excuse, or carry their messages. These individuals are often described as flying monkeys because they may become extensions of the narcissist's influence, intentionally or unintentionally helping maintain the same unhealthy dynamic. If protecting your peace is the goal, reducing unnecessary contact can be one of the healthiest decisions you make. Continuing to keep toxic people involved in your life can make emotional recovery much harder because every interaction has the potential to reopen wounds you are trying to heal. Of course, recovery does not happen on the same schedule for everyone. The amount of time required depends on how long the relationship lasted, how intense the manipulation was, and how deeply the experience affected you. And sometimes complete separation simply is not possible. You may have to communicate with a narcissistic person because of family responsibilities, work, children, or another unavoidable circumstance. In those situations, emotional control becomes extremely important. One useful approach is to stop giving them the emotional reaction they are looking for. Do not reward provocation with anger. Do not give long explanations. Do not get pulled into arguments designed to make you defend yourself endlessly. Sometimes the strongest response is simply no response. Walk past them without hostility. Keep your expression neutral. Keep conversations brief when communication is necessary. Protect your emotional energy instead of allowing them to determine your mood. A narcissist may struggle to understand someone who refuses to participate in their psychological games because those games depend on emotional reactions. They may return to people they previously mistreated simply to reopen old wounds. They might bring up past arguments, provoke resentment, or create new conflict because they assume that your life without them must have been miserable. They want evidence that they still matter. And when they see you angry, bitter, desperate for revenge, or constantly talking about what they did, they may interpret those emotions as proof that they still have influence over you. This is why remaining emotionally trapped in resentment can unintentionally keep you connected to the very person you are trying to escape. You do not have to forgive someone before you are ready. You do not have to pretend the abuse never happened, but you do need to gradually reclaim control over your own emotional life. If every day continues to revolve around what the narcissist did, what they might be doing now, or whether they regret losing you, then they are still occupying space in your mind. Real recovery means taking that space back. Your mindset matters too. Constantly expecting life to go wrong can make the world feel increasingly hopeless. Healing requires more than simply removing the narcissist. It also requires rebuilding your confidence, processing what happened, learning from the experience, and developing a healthier relationship with yourself. You have to give yourself permission to grow beyond what happened to you. And one of the things that can be particularly difficult for a narcissist to witness is the person they once mistreated becoming stronger, happier, and more successful. They may congratulate you publicly. They may pretend they are completely unaffected. They may even act as though your success means nothing to them. But seeing you thrive can still challenge the story they created about you. If they once convinced themselves that you could not function without them, watching you build a better life completely destroys that belief. And when you manage to keep your inner light alive after everything they tried to take from you, that can become especially difficult for them to accept. You are no longer the wounded person they remember. You are no longer waiting for their approval. You are no longer desperate for an apology. You have continued living. That realization can be incredibly frustrating for someone who expected their absence to destroy you. And perhaps one of the most powerful things you can do is stop treating the narcissist as though they are still the center of your world. Not because you are trying to hurt them, not because you want revenge, but because you finally understand that your attention is yours to control. When you stop reacting, stop chasing, stop explaining, and stop allowing their behavior to determine your emotional state, the dynamic begins to lose its power. Your peace becomes more important than proving a point. Your healing becomes more important than their reaction. And your future becomes far more important than anything the narcissist thinks about you. At this stage, you may begin noticing the narcissist trying to find their way back into your life. They may test your boundaries, send unexpected messages, or look for any small opening they can use to regain access to you. This is where you need to be extremely careful. Allowing a narcissist back into your life can reopen the same cycle you worked so hard to escape. Unless they demonstrate genuine remorse, take responsibility for what they did, and show through their actions that they understand the damage they caused, keeping that door closed is often the safest choice. And remember, narcissists may suddenly become incredibly charming when they sense they are losing access to you. They might send an emotional message, make an unexpected romantic gesture, become unusually affectionate, or suddenly behave like the person you always wished they could be. For a moment, you may start wondering whether you made the wrong decision. But that is exactly where you need to look beyond the performance. Once they feel secure again and realize you have lowered your defenses, their old behavior may return. The kindness disappears. The affection fades. The manipulation begins again. If you believe a former narcissist is quietly keeping track of your life or watching to see how you are doing, the strongest protection is maintaining your distance. You do not need to prove anything to them, and you certainly do not need their approval to validate your worth. Your value does not increase because they recognize it. In fact, your growth can become one of the things they find most difficult to accept. Watching you become stronger, happier, more confident, and more emotionally mature can force them to confront qualities they may not possess themselves. Your progress becomes a reminder that you survived what they did. And that is why rebuilding your life after narcissistic abuse is about much more than simply moving on from another person. It is about reclaiming your identity, your confidence, your emotional freedom, and your ability to choose what deserves a place in your life. Protect your peace, protect your energy, and never allow another person's behavior to convince you that your progress is not real. Now let's look at 9 recognizable signs that a narcissist may be trying to get you back under their influence. One of the most important behaviors to understand is something commonly called hoovering. Hoovering happens when a narcissist senses that they are losing their influence over you and suddenly attempts to pull you back into the relationship. The name comes from the idea of a vacuum pulling something back in, and that description fits the behavior surprisingly well. They may suddenly reappear after disappearing for weeks or months. They may act sentimental, concerned, loving, apologetic, or unusually interested in your life. The goal is often not genuine reconciliation. It is to restore access, attention, and control. From the narcissist's perspective, the relationship may be rewritten entirely. They can convince themselves that you were responsible for the breakdown because they have difficulty accepting their own role in what happened. The relationship often follows a familiar progression. In the beginning, they can appear incredibly charming, attentive, and exciting. Over time, however, the idealized image begins to fade, and the unhealthy behavior becomes increasingly visible. So how can you recognize when someone is attempting to pull you back into that cycle? Pay close attention to these 9 warning signs. The first sign is that they suddenly behave as though the past never happened. After a long period of silence, they may contact you casually, as if there was never any serious conflict between you. The message may be sweet, nostalgic, humorous, or strangely familiar. That is exactly why you should remain cautious. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out what their message secretly means, look at the larger behavioral pattern. Are they actually acknowledging what happened, or are they trying to skip over it completely? A narcissist may send a random message asking how you have been. They might share a funny video or meme. They could call unexpectedly just to check in. Sometimes they may bring up memories from the relationship or talk about how wonderful things used to be. Some people who have experienced narcissistic relationships even report receiving unexpected gifts or romantic gestures after periods of complete silence. But notice what may be missing: accountability. A genuine attempt at reconciliation requires more than nostalgia. It requires acknowledging the harm, accepting responsibility, and making a sincere effort to repair the trust that was destroyed. Narcissists often avoid that difficult work. Instead, they may pretend that the painful parts of the relationship simply did not exist. By acting as though everything is normal, they can protect the image they want others to believe, while simultaneously trying to convince you that the relationship should simply continue where it left off. The second sign is an apology that sounds convincing but produces no real change. Narcissists can sometimes say exactly what you want to hear. They may use emotional language, express regret, promise they understand now, and insist they will never repeat the same behavior. But words alone are not evidence of transformation. Before accepting an apology, watch what happens afterward. Do their actions genuinely change, or do the same patterns return? A narcissist may sound deeply remorseful while secretly trying to lower your defenses and regain control. Set a reasonable boundary and observe their reaction. If their supposed regret quickly turns into anger, pressure, guilt, tripping, or accusations because you refuse to give them what they want, their reaction may reveal more than their words ever could. A genuine apology respects your healing process and is followed by consistent behavioral change. Fake remorse usually disappears once it stops producing the desired result. The third sign is an overwhelming flood of affection. Suddenly, they may tell you that you are their greatest love, that nobody compares to you, or that they cannot live without you. This intense behavior is often called love bombing. It can feel powerful because they are saying everything you once wanted to hear. But intensity is not proof of sincerity. When affection suddenly returns after rejection, silence, or mistreatment, watch what happens once the excitement fades. The real question is not how intensely they pursue you today. It is whether they can consistently respect your boundaries tomorrow. For a narcissist, bringing up old romantic memories is one of the easiest ways to pull you back in. They may exaggerate the happiest moments, making the past sound far more beautiful than it really was. They might tell you that you were the only person who ever understood them, or that they will never find anyone like you. These emotional declarations can feel comforting, but they often serve one purpose: getting you to lower your boundaries and return. The fourth sign is making enormous promises they have no intention of keeping. They may suddenly talk about marriage, a future together, expensive gifts, or dream vacations. These promises can sound convincing, but without consistent action, they are simply another part of the charm campaign. The goal is often to make you emotionally dependent on them again. None of this is your fault, and you should never blame yourself for being affected by manipulation.